Good morning, Leader.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to December's meeting of the Lincolnshire County Council Executive. My name is Councillor Martin Hill. I'm leader of the council and chairman of this particular committee. So we've got quite a short agenda this morning, so we'll proceed straight away with that. So we'll just have a roll call to start with, please.
Thank you, Leader. Please can councillors confirm they are present when their name is called? Councillor Mrs Bradwell.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Woolley.
Present.
Councillor Worth.
Present.
Councillor Young.
Present.
And Councillor Parker, who is chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board.
Present.
Thank you. The following officers are also in attendance: Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive; Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources; James Drury, Executive Director for Commercial; Glenn Garrett, Executive Director for Adult Care and Community Wellbeing; Andy Gutherson, Executive Director for Place; Nigel West, Head of Democratic Services; and I'm Cheryl Evans, Democratic Services Officer. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move then on to, are there any apologies for absence? I think not. We think everybody's present.
I've got a couple of apologies, Leader. I've got an apology for absence from Councillor Poll, Commercial and Environmental Management Executive Councillor, and also Heather Sandy, who's the Executive Director for Children's Services. Thank you.
Whether it's me or is it you, I think I'm frozen out, I suspect. Right. Not a good start. Hello?
We can see you, Martin.
Hello.
We can hear you, Leader.
Hello, I think I disappeared on you there, so hopefully you can all hear me again now, can you? Okay,
Yes,
sorry, Cheryl. Were there any apologies? I do apologise for the short interruption.
No, that's fine, Leader. Yes, I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Poll, who's the Executive Councillor for Commercial and Environmental Management, and also Heather Sandy, the Executive Director for Children's Services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So we'll then move on then to the second item, which is any declarations of interest, please. Have anybody, if they have a declaration, please show now. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next item, which I believe will be the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held in November. Is the executive happy that that is a true and accurate record? If you're not happy, please indicate now. So the absence of anybody indicating to the contrary, I'll sign those as a true and accurate record after the meeting. Thank you for that. So then I believe we move on to the third item on the agenda, which is the Director of Public Health. Oh, sorry, I've got any announcements. I do beg your pardon. Are there any announcements which any of the executive would like to make? Councillor Davey, I think we've got some flooding, good news on flooding on various schemes being worked through, aren't there?
There are, Leader, the scheme at Digby, which we have talked about previously at this meeting, is nearing completion. So that means there'll be 58 properties in that community which will be fully protected going forward. The government has also announced through DEFRA some additional funding. We're currently compiling a bid. The pot of money that they've allocated is £150 million. There's going to be 25 areas, so we are hopeful that we will get a successful bid there, and the bid will be going in after Christmas. In terms of other flood work across the county, we currently have 190 investigations ongoing. Reports are currently coming back in fairly rapidly now, and those will be going out as we try and address some of those challenges going forward, Leader. The picture is, I think, an improved one on where we were a year ago, and we're looking forward to a quieter winter than normal, I hope. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Hill's there, or have we lost him?
I don't know. I was just going to ask the same. Should I continue with
No, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So thank you for that. Are there any other any announcements that any executive wishes to make? I've got a hand up, please. Councillor Davey. Is it, I'm presuming?
It's Councillor Davis.
Richard, is it Councillor Davis? Thank you, Richard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's already been widely publicised in the press, but I'd just draw everybody's attention to the fact that this week we've received programme entry for the North Highcombe Relief Road from the Department of Transport and a £110 million contribution towards the construction of the road. We'll now be taking the opportunity to start work on the final design, and obviously more information to follow. But I think it shows a credit to us as an organisation that one of the largest amounts of money ever awarded to a local authority road scheme has come to Lincolnshire County Council, and it's going to be a great scheme for the county and of kind of getting people that crucial north-south link on the A46, and I'm pleased that colleagues from across the region have supported it as well through Midlands Connect. So it's really good news.
Absolutely. And with the Lincoln Eastern bypass nearing completion, it's good news, and Grantham and Spalding continuing. It's it's very good news for Lincolnshire and for the local economy. Good. Okay. Anybody else? I'll move on then to agenda item 5, which is the Director of Public Health's annual report 2020. So, Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everybody. As the cover report states, the Director of Public Health is required by statute to prepare an annual report on the health of the people of the county, and it's the Council's responsibility to publish it. So this year, unsurprisingly, I'm sure, we focused on COVID-19, firstly because obviously it is the single biggest driver of public health and wider health and wellbeing activity in the county, and secondly because we thought it was a good opportunity to pull together where we are up to the point at which we publish the report. Clearly, with COVID-19 moving so quickly, and we are in the midst of the second wave coming out of lockdown number 2, the minute we publish anything, the date is out of date, but we recognise that. We still thought it was important to say what we've done around COVID-19 across the council since the beginning of the pandemic. So the cover report basically just takes us through those parts. I'll pull out the key points from the report, but won't dwell on it too much because I know members of the executive and we'll be fully cited on a lot of this already from other meetings, including the Lincolnshire Outbreak Engagement Board. The way we structured the report, a little bit of context about Lincolnshire for people outside of the county who might be reading. We've talked about the impact of COVID-19 in Lincolnshire right the way from the beginning, and obviously it changes on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, and also how we experienced the pandemic in wave 1 and wave 2 and some of the changes throughout those periods. We talked specifically about what I see as a real strength of the Lincolnshire response, which is the multi-agency response, and how we've come together as an overarching system to respond. And we've put a little bit in there about future planning and what's like to happen for the rest of the winter, and then some of the recovery work that we will need to do, both short and medium term. Of course, a lot of this we don't know for sure in terms of longer term impacts on health and well-being of COVID-19, what people are calling long COVID, but there's also going to be mental health and well-being issues that I'm sure will come out of this. So the report really builds on a lot of papers that members of the executive will already have seen. I think the key points are that we continue to deal with what is a highly challenging situation, considering that Lincolnshire overall has an older population than the overall age range in England. We've experienced below England average impacts right the way through the pandemic. Clearly, on any given day, on any given week, that will bounce around, and we know across the county. Looking at the county, it averages out the differences that we see at district level and at very local level, whether it's particular outbreak in care homes or factory settings or school settings. But the report pretty well gives us, I think, a good overview of where we are, where we have been, and where we are going. I won't pick out any specific further information, I don't think, apart from to jump to what is in your pack, page 33, but in the report is page 22, which talks about the longer term health and wellbeing implications of COVID-19, because the data and the outline previously, you'll all be fully cited on. And there's a figure there that talks about some of the key issues that we know are going to be a challenge for us. We have, throughout the pandemic, obviously nationally and globally, needed to balance the impact of lockdowns and the restrictions for COVID-19 against the impacts on people's liberty, on the economy. And really, that section starts to describe some of the evidence that's coming out. I know it's a very live issue as we move into out of lockdown number 2 and into our tier 3 restrictions, which we'll be entering. So I thought I'd bring that particular part to members' site. And then just the conclusion really is that throughout the pandemic, the key messages we've been pushing as a system are to make sure that we were washing our hands properly for 20 seconds with soap and water, or if you're out and about and you can't do that, to use an alcohol-based hand gel, to make sure that you cover your face in an enclosed space or anywhere where there's a lot of people, and to make sure you keep your 2 meters. And we're just reiterating those messages right at the end of the report. The final thing I'd like to say is thank you to everybody who's contributed, firstly, to the writing of this report, because we've all been snowed under, as I'm sure you understand. So I really appreciate the wider team who've pulled a lot of this together for me. And secondly, the wider system, for everybody who's responded. It really has been a privilege to be part of that response. We're not through the woods yet. We've got what I think will be quite a challenging winter. But as we get more vaccines, as we get better testing regimes, and as spring comes, I'm sure we'll be in a better position. I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions, Leader.
Thank you very much, Derek, and thank you for, obviously we have to have a report presented, and know your team, you've been very, especially busy obviously at the moment, and thank you for producing this. It was, Councillor Parker, I did think it did go to scrutiny, over scrutiny. Was there anything you wanted to highlight from that debate? Am I correct?
Sorry, no, this hasn't been to
All right, I do apologise.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bradwell.
Yes, just Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to also say thanks to Derek and his team. And I think actually in Lincolnshire, for a start, when the pandemic started, I was regularly briefed from the commissioning team, Alina, about the issues we had with PPE and how difficult that was to source. Actually, we found a way, and I think that's what Lincolnshire does really. As a group, county council and district councils, we do find, and with our partners, we do find a way forward. And I think that just shows where we are now. Yes, we're in another pandemic situation, but actually I think all our partners are there, and if we get a problem, we all work together to solve it. And I think it is down to the leadership there that actually gives that confidence to our staff to do that. So I think we're in pretty safe hands, I have to say. But I just want just echo what the leader said. All the people who've been working have done a great job, our staff, everybody's staff, but it is about us all still being careful about what we do. We all understand that, but as I say, I feel we're doing all we can to actually help people across this county, whether it's care homes, whether it's people individually. So I just want to say thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Woody.
Thank you, Leader. I would just like to echo Councillor Bradwell's comments and thank you, Derek, and your team for all the work that you're doing. Everybody is putting in 25 hours in a day, it feels like at the moment. But nevertheless, what comes out is that feeling of calm, of control. The team all seem to know what they're doing, and it does feel as though Lincolnshire is in some very safe hands. So I too would like to extend my thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Leader. And I too would like to add my grateful thanks to Derek and his whole team for the work that they've done over the last year. It has been very, very challenging. Just a question for Derek, really, going forward. We all know how devastating COVID has been in terms of the national and local economy. And obviously, we're looking forward with some hope that vaccines will be effective next year in helping the economy to recover. We all know that we don't need to vaccinate the entire population to deliver a herd immunity situation. Bearing in mind, we've never attempted in this country a rollout on vaccination like we are about to try and do. When do you think, Derek, realistically, we could get to a point where we could say we've achieved the best we can for the county in terms of the vaccination programme? Will it be 6 months? Will it be 9 months? What do you think realistically is our hope for the vaccination programme? And how effective do you think it will be in terms of mutations or longevity? Will we have to repeat these vaccinations every year for the whole population to keep that effectiveness? Because people need to make decisions about the economy going forward and what they are going to do in terms of their businesses and investment. So any kind of light on that subject would be helpful. Thank you, Derek.
Thanks, Councillor Davey, and thank you to everybody for the feedback. In terms of how quickly we'll be rolling out a vaccine, as a county, as a system, we've been working really hard to be ready to roll it out as soon as vaccines become available and are approved for use. As we know from the media, there are a number of different vaccines coming through. As of yesterday, as far as I'm aware, none have been yet approved by the MHRA. But as soon as they are and we start to receive them, I'm confident in Lincolnshire we'll be in a position to start rolling out. But obviously the amount of vaccine will crank up over the weeks and months as production increases. I think in terms of when it will have an impact, it will have an impact very quickly because we are going to be targeting the most at risk of severe COVID complications. So the national programme, as of again yesterday, and this could change, is to firstly vaccinate people who are working or living in care homes and NHS frontline key worker staff. So that will obviously give them a level of protection, and all the evidence coming through is that all of the vaccines give a good level of protection. We think we'll need 2 doses, but it's likely that people will get some protection after 1 dose. So straight away we'll start to protect our most vulnerable or our most at-risk people, and that'll be a real positive. And fingers crossed we can start to do that before Christmas, but it is dependent upon getting the vaccine and it being approved for use. I think that will then scale up through January, February and March. I can't say how many people will be vaccinated because it depends which vaccine comes and the supply. But certainly the government has bought more than enough different vaccines to make sure that we can cover everybody once we get those supplies through. I think spring will have a really positive impact on our infection rates and will bring down our rates as well as the vaccine, which will then give us space and time through spring and summer to carry on our vaccination programme. So I think by autumn next year, we should have, touch wood, all things being equal, we should have been able to vaccinate a big proportion of the people who are most at risk, and actually a big proportion of the wider population as well. So come this time next year, we will be in a much, much different position, I would imagine, and all the evidence points to that. In terms of mutations, as you know, we have to have a different flu vaccination every year because flu mutates quite quickly. Our current understanding for coronaviruses generally, of which COVID-19 is, or SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus, is one, is that they don't mutate anywhere near as quickly as flu. Now, that doesn't mean we won't have to adapt to the vaccine as we go. We might well do. But really, the answers to those questions will come in time once we start to vaccinate the population. I don't, if I had to put my money on it, I wouldn't imagine we would have to revaccinate everybody every year. I think it may be that after a period of time, a new vaccine might be more effective, and we would want to vaccinate those who are most at risk. But we'll find out over the years. But certainly by the autumn next year, I think we'll be in a much, much better position and actually going through because the amount of the disease around will have dropped. I think we'll be in a much better position as well. We've got to get through to spring is the key point.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Anybody else? I mean, would you like to comment on the current wave? And it seems to be a wave which is hitting parts of Lincolnshire. We know that East Lindsey is now going down, but Boston's going up. Because your assessment of where, we are learning all the time, aren't we? What your assessment is where we're getting to in this current sort of period.
Yes, thanks, Leader. I think overall, from a county perspective, we are coming down from the peak, and we saw the peak probably around 17th, 18th, 19th of November. That was expected, and the government's actually published some further information last night that shows that for those areas that were in Tier 1 going into the lockdown, the pattern we've seen is similar across other places who are Tier 1 going into lockdown. So we're on a downward trajectory. As with Wave 1, it will be probably a slower downward trajectory, and it'll be bumpier than it was going up. And we saw that with Wave 1, if you remember. But we're definitely overall as a county on a downward trajectory. We've seen that with East Lindsey, for example. Boston has had an uptick, but we're almost certain that that's down to a couple of pretty significant outbreaks in a couple of care homes in Boston. We're in conversation with the district council. We'll be having an incident control team meeting with them tomorrow. But I expect Boston towards the end of this week's figures will drop again because those outbreaks were about 7 days ago. And because we use a 7-day rolling average, that'll start to drop off the figures. So I would think that where we are now, we will continue to see a downward trend, but it won't be as fast as the upward trend as we were going in. But hopefully it will carry on well into December, both because the impact of lockdown 2 will be delayed, and we'll see the benefits into the beginning of December, and also obviously with the government putting the entirety of Lincolnshire into Tier 3. Again, the evidence would suggest that will continue that downward trend and mean that our rates are lower as we go into the Christmas period.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, it is like, if you imagine a wave coming down the East Coast from Grimsby through East Lindsey, Boston, is there a risk that South Holland could be next in line? Is there anything we can do to help prevent that?
I don't think so much. It'll be a wave in terms of the geography. I think it's a wave more in terms of the age bands and the age profiles. So I think all places are on a downwards trend, albeit some will bounce up and down as we go down. So rather than a nice smooth downwards trend, we'll be doing that. in certain districts, and it is possible that South Holland may bounce up in the next few days. The key thing is when we look at week by week, are we overall and at each district on a downwards trend? And the answer probably there is yes. And I would expect that to continue certainly through to the middle of December. Fingers crossed right the way up to Christmas. And then obviously we have the government guidance around Christmas where 3 families can come together, and we'll have to see what the impact of that is early in the new year.
Thank you for that. Good. Unless there's any further questions, again, thank you very much for the report, but also thank you and your team for all the excellent work you're all doing. And obviously there's been, as people are well aware, there's been arguments about whether certain parts of Lincolnshire should be treated differently. It would appear that we will see what happens today, but I think the argument on all these things is that the government ought to trust the local areas more than they currently do, and I think we're confident with Derek and his team we could make a lot of these difficult decisions ourselves rather than it being dealt with in London. But I think a lot of stuff can be done better locally by local directors of public health and local politicians. But we are where we are, but hopefully we'll get ourselves in a better place. So the recommendations then is that we receive the report, so I presume everybody's happy to receive it. I won't go into a voting scenario. So with that, thank you very much, Derek, for what you're doing, and touch wood, we'll come out of it. And obviously in the future we need to start talking about the economic recovery and how the council can then assist Lincolnshire businesses to move forward once things are in a better place. Thank you, Derek. Okay, I'll take that as agreed then. So I'll now move on to item 6, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Reports Q2 for this financial year. So, Andrew, are you going to start?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Good morning, councillors. I've also got Michelle Grady on the line as well to cover some of the detail shortly in terms of the favourable movements that we've seen in general since we last brought a report to you in September. I just thought it might be useful just to provide a couple of further headlines from the spending review from last week for the benefit of members, as well as just to cover some aspects of COVID-related funding that aren't in the current monitoring report. So in terms of the spending round, obviously Councillor Davies and Davey have already shared the excellent news around flooding funding and the highways news. But in terms of our sort of budget planning and budget thoughts for next year, there were a few major announcements within there that will change our thinking slightly. So the Chancellor announced a public sector pay freeze for next year, and whilst it doesn't naturally follow that local government pay will automatically freeze, it does generally happen that way once negotiations go into effect. And just for context, every percent of pay on our bill, an increase, 1% increase accounts for about £1.5 million. There was also an announcement and a change in emphasis around council tax rates. So the Chancellor signalled that councils will be able to levy a 3% adult social care precept for next year, with the ability to spread it over 2 years if required, as well as a 2% increase on general council tax. Again, for context, a percent in council tax normally generates an additional £3 million for the council. One of the things that all councils across the country have been worried about is the issue around council tax losses arising from the COVID crisis, and this is particularly around people who've been unable to pay their council tax bills, which in turn would create a collection deficit on the collection fund for council tax. Now, the government have put in place two particular measures. The first, in respect to the 2020-21 financial year, whereby the government will cover the 75% in the pound after the first 5% of loss, which is a positive piece of news, but also as well a national £650 million grant for potential council tax losses that are deemed irrecoverable in the next financial year as well. So generally good coverage in terms of council tax losses for councils, which is of great concern in budget setting. Also a £300 million national grant for adults and children's social care. You'll be aware that typically we receive about 1% of that nationally normally. The government have said that they are looking at a distribution method that would include some equalisation methodology as well to account for council's abilities to raise the adult social care precept council tax. So more news on that in the local government settlement, which we expect to be delivered around about the 17th of December, so just before Christmas. Just moving on to COVID, obviously the Director of Public Health just gave a thorough overview of the COVID position, and what's not in the report that Michelle's about to go through is some recent funding that we've received around the 28-day lockdown, which obviously ends today or tomorrow, whereby we've been given £8 per head of population for the November measure, so about £3 million a month for any council that's in a Tier 3 area. The spending review as well also announced £1.55 billion nationally earmarked for continuing cost pressures into the next financial year, so the 21-22 financial year. And as Michelle, as is outlined in the paper, we've obviously received different distributions of the national funding during this current financial year. So that could equate to anything in between about £7 and £15 million for this council, depending on the types of pressures that we're reporting into that next financial year. So I just wanted to cover those, live news, Leader. But I'd now hand over to Michelle just to cover the main aspects of the report, if that's okay, please.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Leader. So good morning, I'm Michelle Grady, the Assistant Director for Finance, and the first report I'm presenting this morning is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report for Q2. The main focus of this report is to give you an update on our performance against business as usual budgets for the period up to the end of September, and to give you an update on the COVID spend as well for the same period. If you look at page 38 of your pack, the summary table on that page shows you the variances against each of our summary budget lines. You'll see that our previous forecast for the total excluding schools was an overspend of 3.5 million, and our current forecast at Q2 is a variance excluding schools is an underspend of 1.9 million, which is a positive movement of 5.5 million over the forecast period. I'll just pick out some of the largest variances. Paragraphs 1.4 to 1.9 set those out in the report. A couple of the larger ones, children's social care, the overspend in this area is reduced by 1.5 million, but we are still reporting a forecast overspend on looked after children, mainly to do with specialist placements and the numbers of children there, and that's an overspend of 1.9 million. Lots of work going on in that area to help mitigate that overspend, which is currently being offset by grant utilisation, some staff savings and COVID savings as well that we've reported in the main body of the report. Also on children, the overspend on home to school transport has reduced by just under £500,000, but still forecasting an overspend on that area of 1.2 million. In place, the overspend has reduced by £500,000. The key variances there is mainly on waste services, primarily mixed dry recycling, forecasting an overspend of 1.8 million, but in place that's being offset by a new forecast underspend on transport services of £1 million. And on other budgets, we're forecasting a new underspend of 2.5 million, relating primarily to the corporate redundancy budgets and other pay contingencies. Excluded from those figures, but included in the report, is an expected underspend on capital financing, which is the revenue cost of the capital programme that we have. The plan is to transfer that to reserves at the end of the year to smooth out the cost of our whole capital programme. So if I just moved on to the financial impact of COVID, page 40 of the report summarises the key points around the financial impact that we're seeing at the moment. Clearly, the report will have been presented and put together before the second spike and lockdown, so some of these numbers are still kind of in flux and we'll update them as we go along. The main position is summarised in Appendix K on page 82. We're reporting actual losses and expenditure up to the end of October of just under £23 million. And the forecast at the time the report was pulled together is currently just over £40 million. As I say, that was ahead of the second spike, and we are seeing costs occurring in the adult social care realm, so keeping that figure under close monitoring. We've received 44.5 million of the emergency COVID grant from government. That's the general grant that's been distributed on the COVID relative needs formula that the government's come up with. As Andrew's just said, we've got some more recent grants that have come in, but we've also received some specific grants around quite recently about winter support to children and families. That's been 2.2 million come into the organisation. Support to the clinically extremely vulnerable, just under £500,000. And as Andrew's mentioned, the Contained Outbreak Management Fund, the original pot of that was just around 6 million. You'll see in the report as well that we've highlighted some of the savings that were identified as a direct result of COVID, mainly to do with some contract costs and things like staff travel, members travel, delays in recruitment. So we've identified £4.8 million worth of savings in the budgets that's incorporated into the figures that you're seeing in the report today. So on that point, I'll just hand over for any questions or anything that anybody wants to raise.
Okay, questions or anything to raise? Councillor Parker. Councillor Parker, did any scrutiny comments you want to highlight, please?
Sure. There was a two-page report from scrutiny circulated to members.
Thank you.
Just to go through that very briefly, we recognise the current forecast surplus was on the budget as normal was 1.9 million, and the COVID underspend is 7.67. We highlighted some and recognised some of the pressures that were facing the county council, particularly in relation to the children's services social care budget, two particular areas as well: dependent education, health and care plans going up, looked after children requiring special placements, and the lack of market provision. These were to be expected. Homeschool transport has become an issue, and it does raise questions about the future, because the COVID outbreak could have an impact on the supply of homeschool transport services, which really is about competition, the lack of competition. So we want to bring that to the attention of Councillor Bradwell. I'm sure that you're well aware of it and are working on it. Overspend on waste services due to a previous contractor going into administration. And we had a discussion about how well do we do our, what we might call forward planning in relation to due diligence as to whether or not we could have avoided that situation. We were to an extent reassured that due diligence had been done, and that it was probably as much as anything unforeseen. The question of the underspend on the redundancy budget was also mentioned. Low level of restructuring taking place within the council at the moment, because we are primarily focusing on getting work done, and that has contributed to an underspend of 1.5 million. So overall, two things. One, despite the difficulties of the national and local situation as far as COVID is concerned, our budget is in a pretty sound position. And secondly, we wanted to recognise, and I'm sure everybody does, the major contribution made by members of our staff members. We wanted to recognise their effort in maintaining services during these particularly challenging times.
Thank you very much for that. Good. Yes, as you say, overall a reassuring picture, but challenges remain altogether, of course. Any questions, comments? Andrew, just while I was thinking about that, you did mention about additional support, which, if I understood you correctly, was mostly around sort of dealing with the health side of coronavirus. Is there any money? Obviously, some other areas who've gone into these tiers have had money to support business. We don't know what's going to happen today in terms of what's going to be decided in Parliament, but from your perspective, from our perspective, have we had any money per se to support businesses directly?
As yet, no. And I think you'll be aware that obviously the high profile, I guess, in the media during the summer, particularly around the Greater Manchester deal. We understand that some of those early tier 3 areas received something in the region of about £20 per head for business support, which is obviously quite a sizable figure. For Lincolnshire, it'd be about £15 million. The messages that came out last week from government around new tier 3 restrictions were there'd be no more funding available for business support centrally. Though clearly there has been a change, as you've referred to, Leader, over the weekend. We've seen this morning, I think there's an announcement potentially of £40 million for what they're calling wet drinking establishments that may need to continue to be closed. So keeping a keen eye on what's happening nationally, and naturally, if there is money available, we will be tapping into that and obviously pending conversations with members about it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradwell.
Yes, obviously, as been mentioned in my area, we have got a few little things bubbling away. But I think we've got good plans to pull that budget back. I mean, Rob mentioned the education, health and care plans, and we knew when they were brought in by the government that it was a little bit more easier to get probably an EHC plan. And obviously we're now putting lots of help into schools so that before they recommend somebody, a child for an EHC plan, you know, we've been through lots of things with the school to make sure that everything is being done there. Obviously looked after children, we're looking at different, trying to bring some of our children back in who had to go out in the first wave of COVID out of county in a placement. And we are looking at getting a couple more children's homes, and that's not as easy as one might think, because obviously, you know, it's not like buying your own house, so to speak. And school transport, obviously Councillor Richard Davies and myself are on meeting with officers regularly about how we try and look at probably remodelling how we deliver transport in the county. And I know Richard again, you know, the highways area transportation area are looking at that. So there is quite a lot going on. At the moment, it might not feel that we've got the nut crack, because we haven't, but we are working to ensure that we become a little more settled, and you know, we can they're not running out of control, which they seem to do in the first lockdown period. I have to say, I think since the summer, I think things have sort of levelled off, and things aren't still spiraling out of control, but we will see where we go and how long, you know, this situation lasts for. If it continued, probably we would be placing children out of county again. So that's what I wanted to say. I just want to give some confidence to people that actually we are doing all we can, and hopefully we will be able to bring the budget back under control.
Thank you for that. That's reassuring. I'm sure you will. Any further comments then, please? Okay, thank you for that. So with that, the recommendation is that the report is noted. So unless anybody doesn't want to note the report, I'll take it that we all agree to note the report. Is that, unless I hear anything to the contrary? Okay, thank you for that. So we'll move then on to the final item, which is the capital monitoring programme for the same period. So Michelle, is that straight to Michelle? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's back to me. Thank you, Leader. So the second report is the Q2 capital budget monitoring situation, forecasts up to the end of September as per the previous report. We're currently forecasting an underspend of 5.4 million on the capital programme. It's a lower underspend than we were forecasting in period one. That's mainly due to work that's been done over the summer to look at the phasing of the capital programme and the expected time and delivery of the programme. And a number of budgets have been rephased to reflect the potential timing of spend in the programme. I'm just going to highlight a couple of variances in the current year and on the whole scheme programme. So we've got a couple of larger variances, mainly on the main road schemes. So the Lincoln Eastern bypass, we are forecasting an overspend in the current year of 1.8 million, with a whole scheme forecast being an overspend of 8.7 million on that scheme, and a similar position for Grantham Southern Relief Road. showing an underspend in the current year due to timing of the works of 10.4 million, but showing a whole scheme overspend forecast of 8.8 million across the whole scheme. Those overspends will be looked at and dealt with when we bring the budget proposals back for the future capital programme to the executive, and that will be looked at through that process. So I don't have anything else that I wanted to highlight in the report. It's just if there's any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions, anybody on that? Seems pretty straightforward, and looking at the detail, there is a lot of good news in there in terms of investment. Councillor Parker, scrutiny?
Sure, yeah. Overspend was the key issue. The two big overspends, as Michelle has mentioned, Lincoln Eastern Bypass and the Grantham Southern Relief Road. And how do we tackle it in the sense of recognising that, yes, it's very difficult to get exactly right because of unknown circumstances, contractors going into liquidation or flooding. But we were interested in setting up some formal process to review each contract at the end of it to see benefits gained and the way that we tackled it. And there was mention of a capital review group being set up. Now that there is, as we understand it, an officer group, a capital review group, but members may want to take more of an interest for a number of reasons. One is to consider how good we are, and probably we are pretty good, but are we able to improve? And secondly, that for each of the big overspends that we have, it delays work further down the line because it means a rephasing of the capital programme. So yes, we continue with the Lincoln Eastern Bypass and the Grantham Southern Relief Road, currently coming in at about £18 million overspend, and that will have an impact on other people's schemes in the short term and long term for that matter. So because we have to rebalance the programme unless we spend more money with the extended capital programme in order to substitute new cash for money that's already been spent. So the general thought is, how can we as a county council exercise some greater oversight, or at least recognise where things are going astray, and also learn lessons. And it seems as though, because of the big amounts of money involved, this is something that both the executive and scrutiny ought to seriously consider.
Thank you for that. And I think some very valid points there. And I'm going to ask Andrew in a moment just to outline what measures are being put in place to oversee these major projects in particular, and make sure that the initial assessments of the costs are realistic, but also how that can be done through the officer corps, but also how that then can be given member oversight, as you said, both in scrutiny terms and in executive terms. So Andrew, you just want to outline what work you've been doing. As Councillor Parker will know, in days gone by, we had something called the Capital Monitoring Subcommittee, which probably got a little bit into the weeds of detail, but I think there is a need for some sort of oversight to make sure we're on track and give more early warning of issues as they arise. So Andrew, you just want to explain what measures you put in place to address this issue.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So you obviously, both Michelle and I, obviously being relatively new into post this time last year, obviously through conversations with yourself, we identified that an officer process before, to support the democratic process would be useful in terms of making sure that the relevant professions were all around the table in terms of making business cases a richer piece of work for which you could obviously sign off as members. So we've since June we're now on a monthly process. It is gathering steam now. We've had some really good meetings recently. Particularly, we had a really good session with Sam Edwards from Highways at the most recent meeting. which was really, it was a learning experience in terms of how complicated these projects that Councillor Park has just referred to. Obviously been supporting Sam over the last week since the Relief Road announcement last week in terms of certifying that, in terms of the county council support. Massively complex projects, but ones that the more people know about. We've got a lot of fantastic collective brain power in this council, both at member level and at officer level, and that collective endeavour supporting these big projects can only be a good thing, I think. So the process is working well now. The support that we're providing to the development of business cases is starting to gain traction, as well as the support to the budget process, which you as members will see in January and February time. So work in progress, but positive strides so far. I think I've noticed, Leader, that Andy's put his hand up as well. Andy sits on the group as well, so you might want to add to anything that I've said.
Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Again, just to reassure Councillor Parker and the rest of the executive, in the context of the issues that perhaps have given rise to some of the overspends on both Lincoln Eastern Bypass and Grantham, we are taking account of those in the context of understanding the options for going forward with the North Highcombe Relief Road, which Councillor Davis mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. Obviously, the lead-in time from now to actually potentially being on site is 4 to 5 years. So over that period of time, there's, again, the complexities that Andrew references will continue to come forward. So I think you will see, as we go forward with the developing the business case for the North Highcombe Relief Road, other options being presented back into councillors for decision in terms of how we actually demonstrate those lessons learned in terms of governance matters, procurement issues, and the control that we actually exercise over those projects. So whilst it may not be visible at the moment, Councillor Parker, the Officer Corps are working to actually understand and recognise the lessons learned. And also within that, tighten up on some of our relationships with some of our major contractors and suppliers to actually, again, try and exercise greater control at the right time in the process. So, again, the contractual arrangements that we have perhaps need to be used a bit more positively and more proactively at the right time as well.
Thank you. I think that's last point is very valid, that it just in an early warning of issues, so that if there's any actions could be taken to ameliorate problems, could be taken earlier. And obviously we are working as a member perspective once this officer system is up and running properly, that how that then translates into supporting members on an exception basis, either good or bad, to make sure that councillors are aware of any issues and any actions which have to be taken to do that. We do have a very large capital programme and very many major projects going forward, and we are confident, even though, I mean, the North Highcombe Relief Road is what, £150 million or something of that order, isn't it? Another big scheme, which, so we've got a lot of money out, a lot of projects going on out there, which you need to make sure that they are delivered as cost effectively as possible. Any other further comments, questions then, please? Okay, again, I take it that you're all happy to note the report, councillors. If anybody's not, please let me know now and indicate. Otherwise, I'll take it that the report is duly noted. Okay, thank you. I think that's, I'm correct, Nigel, is the final item on the agenda. So that's correct. Is that correct? So with that, thank you very much, all of you, for your attendance, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.